In the quiet town of Ravenshire, nothing ever seemed to change. The streets were calm, the shops opened and closed at the same time every day, and people lived simple, predictable lives. Everyone knew each other, or at least they thought they did. Alice Beetham lived at the far end of Willow Lane in a narrow brick house that looked no different from the others. She was 27 years old and worked at a small antique shop in the town center. Customers described her as polite but distant. She spoke softly, never smiled for long, and avoided eye contact whenever possible. To most people, Alice was forgettable. But there were small details, easy to ignore, yet strangely unsettling. She rarely spoke about her past. No one knew where she had come from, and no family or friends ever visited her. Packages would arrive at her house late at night, always unmarked. Sometimes neighbors noticed her carrying heavy boxes inside, struggling but refusing help. Her routine was unusual. While the rest of Ravenshire slept, Alice's house came alive. Lights flickered at odd hours, especially between 2 and 4 a.m. On some nights, a low scraping noise could be heard, like furniture being dragged across the floor. One neighbor once knocked on her door to ask if everything was all right. Alice answered after a long pause. She looked pale, tired, but calm. "Just cleaning," she said quietly, before closing the door. After that, no one asked again. Life went on, just as it always had, until one morning Alice didn't show up for work. At first, it didn't seem important, but as the hours passed, a strange feeling settled over the town. By the second day, concern turned to unease, and by the third, Ravenshire realized something was very, very wrong. When the police arrived at Alice Beetham's house, the street was unusually quiet. A few neighbors watched from behind their curtains, whispering to each other. Something about the place already felt off. The front door stood slightly open. One officer pushed it gently, and it creaked as it swung inward. Inside, everything looked perfectly normal at first. The living room was neat, almost unnaturally tidy. Books were aligned in straight lines, furniture placed with exact precision, and not a single item seemed out of place. It didn't look lived in, it looked arranged, too arranged. But then came the smell. It was faint but noticeable, a strange mix of metal and something sour, the kind of smell that made you uncomfortable without knowing why. The officers moved carefully through the house. The kitchen was spotless. The sink was dry. No food was left out. It was as if no one had been there for days or longer. Then one officer noticed something unusual on the floor. Thin scratch marks. They stretched across the wooden surface, deep enough to catch the light. The marks led in one direction, toward a closed door at the end of the hallway. The basement. The door was locked, but not from the inside, from the outside. That detail alone made the officers pause. After forcing it open, the smell grew stronger, heavier. They descended the stairs slowly, each step creaking under their weight. At the bottom, a single dim bulb flickered, barely lighting the room. The basement was large and disturbing. Old furniture stood covered in white sheets, like silent figures watching from the shadows. In the center of the room was a heavy wooden chair, firmly bolted to the floor. Next to it hung rusted chains. The air felt thick, suffocating, and resting neatly on the chair, a small notebook. Inside were dozens of names, all crossed out, except one: Alice Beetham. The discovery in the basement changed everything. What began as a simple missing person case quickly turned into something far darker. Investigators focused on the notebook found on the chair. Each name was written carefully, almost neatly, as if it mattered, and every name, except one, had been crossed out. When the police ran those names through national databases, a chilling pattern emerged. They were all reported missing. Some had disappeared recently. Others had been gone for years. The cases came from different towns, even different regions, with no clear connection between them. Until now. Alice Beetham was the only link. The investigation expanded immediately. Detectives began contacting families, reopening cold cases, and piecing together timelines. Slowly, a disturbing picture started to form. Many of the missing individuals had last been seen traveling alone. Some were passing through nearby areas. None had any known connection to Alice, or so it seemed. Back at the house, forensic teams worked around the clock. The basement became the center of attention. Using ground-penetrating tools, investigators scanned beneath the floor. Within hours, they found irregularities, disturbances in the soil that shouldn't have been there. They began to dig. What they uncovered was horrifying. Human remains. Carefully buried beneath the floorboards, wrapped in layers of plastic and cloth, each body showed signs of planning and control. This wasn't random, it wasn't rushed, it was methodical. The kind of work that takes time and patience. Shock spread quickly through Ravenshire. The quiet town was now the center of a growing nightmare. But even with this discovery, one terrifying question remained unanswered. If Alice Beetham was responsible for all this, just as fear began to spread beyond Ravenshire, the case took a sudden and unexpected turn. 3 days after the basement discovery, a woman walked into a small police station over 100 miles away. She appeared calm, almost composed as she approached the front desk. "I think you're looking for me," she said quietly. When officers asked her name, she replied without hesitation, "Alice Beetham." At first, they didn't believe her, but after a quick check, her fingerprints confirmed the truth. The missing woman had just turned herself in. What shocked investigators even more was her behavior. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't scared. She seemed relieved. During questioning, Alice spoke clearly and without emotion. She didn't deny anything. In fact, she admitted to the crimes almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for this moment. But her explanation made the case even more disturbing. She claimed the people in the notebook were not random victims. According to her, each one had done something terrible: abuse, fraud, violence, but had escaped punishment. She said she had been watching them, studying their lives, waiting for the right time. "I gave them the justice they avoided," she told the detectives calmly. At first, this seemed possible. Investigators began checking backgrounds, and in some cases, Alice's claims appeared true. But then, the pattern broke. Several of the names belonged to people with no criminal history at all, ordinary individuals, innocent lives. When confronted with this contradiction, Alice didn't argue. She simply leaned back, a faint smile forming on her face. Not everyone shows you who they really are. Her words left the room in silence. Was she lying, confused, or hiding something far more dangerous? The truth, it seemed, was still out of reach. Alice Beetham's trial drew attention from across the country. Reporters filled the courtroom, eager to understand how a quiet, almost invisible woman could be connected to such calculated horrors. The evidence was undeniable. The basement, the remains, the notebook filled with names. Everything pointed directly to her. And yet, something about the case still didn't feel complete. Alice remained calm throughout the trial. She showed no anger, no regret, no fear. When asked to explain her actions, she repeated the same claim that she had been delivering justice where the system had failed. But she never raised her voice, never tried to defend herself in a typical way. It was as if she had already accepted her fate. Then, just days before the final verdict, investigators revealed a discovery that shifted the entire case. Hidden within the walls of Alice's house were several old recording devices, small, carefully concealed, and easy to miss. Dozens of tapes were recovered, each labeled with dates. When authorities began listening to them, the atmosphere in the investigation changed completely. Some recordings captured Alice speaking to herself. Others sounded like conversations. But there was something else. Another voice. Low, calm, unfamiliar. It spoke in measured tones, giving instructions, asking questions, guiding her actions. In several recordings, Alice responded as if she were being directed, almost controlled. Detectives searched for any evidence of another person, fingerprints, DNA, surveillance footage, anything that could identify the voice. There was nothing, no trace, no presence, just a voice on tape. Despite the uncertainty, the court reached its decision. Alice Beetham was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But even after the case was closed, one question refused to fade. Was Alice truly the mastermind behind it all, or was the real architect of the horror never found?
If this case left you questioning what's real and what's hidden beneath the surface, then you're exactly where you need to be. Because stories like this don't end when the verdict is given. They stay with you. So if you want more dark, unsettling true crime stories that challenge what you think you know, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. And tell me in the comments, do you think Alice Beetham acted alone? Or was someone else still out there? This is just the beginning.